Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going deep into the world of metagenomics and pandemic monitoring. You might be thinking, wait, what's metagenomics? Well, it's basically like taking a DNA test for a whole city,
Yeah.
except instead of swabbing cheeks, we're analyzing wastewater.
Yeah, it might sound a little unusual, but what's fascinating is that wastewater contains genetic material from everything that goes down the drain. Bacteria, viruses, human cells, you name it. It's a gold mine of information about the health of a community.
It is. And I was reading this scientific paper called METAGENE-1, Metagenomic Foundation Model for Pandemic Monitoring. And let me tell you, this is where it gets really interesting. This paper introduces a new AI called METAGENE-1, and it can analyze trillions of DNA and RNA sequences from wastewater. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, the size of Mount Everest.
That's a great analogy. And what makes Metagene 1 even more remarkable is that it's not just good at finding needles in haystacks, it's actually learned how to understand the hay itself. The researchers found that Metagene 1 actually outperformed other AI models that were trained on human and animal genomes when it came to understanding genetic sequences.
So it's not just a specialist. It's like this AI has a PhD in genetics from the University of Everything.
Exactly. It's learned some fundamental principles about how genetic information works, regardless of the species. And that's really powerful because it allows Metagene 1 to do some pretty amazing things.
Okay, give me an example. What kind of amazing things are we talking about?
Well, one of the most important is pathogen detection. Think about it. If you could detect a new virus outbreak in a city just by analyzing the wastewater, that's the kind of early warning system that Metagene 1 could provide.
Wow. That's like having a microbial smoke detector for an entire city.
Precisely. And it can go even further than that. Metagene 1 can also create what are called embeddings of genetic sequences. These are like numerical fingerprints that capture the essence of a particular sequence. So not only can it detect a pathogen, it can also track how it's changing over time.
So it's not just identifying the bad guys. It's also figuring out if they're getting stronger, weaker, or even evolving into new variants.
You got it. And that's crucial information for developing effective treatments and vaccines.
Okay, so it can detect pathogens, track their evolution. What else can this AI do?
Another fascinating capability is anomaly detection. Since Metagene 1 is trained on a massive amount of normal wastewater data, it's really good at spotting things that are out of the ordinary. So if a brand new pathogen suddenly appears, Metagene 1 could flag it as an anomaly, even if we've never seen it before.
Wait, so it's not just about reacting to known threats, it's also about getting ahead of the curve and potentially preventing outbreaks before they even start.
That's the idea. And that's what makes this technology so groundbreaking.
Okay, so we've got this AI that can detect known pathogens, track their evolution, identify new variants, and spot anomalies that might signal an emerging threat. This is feeling like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does sound futuristic, doesn't it? But the science is real. And the potential benefits for public health are enormous.
So you're telling me we could have this system where AI is constantly monitoring our wastewater for signs of disease and potentially preventing outbreaks before they even happen.
It does sound incredible, doesn't it? But of course, there are always challenges and limitations when you're working with cutting-edge technology like this.
Right. And the paper actually goes into quite a bit of detail about those challenges. One thing that stood out to me was the discussion of open sourcing the model. They seem to be wrestling with the pros and cons of making this technology freely available.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough decision. On one hand, open sourcing allows for more transparency and collaboration. Other researchers can build upon the work, potentially leading to even more powerful tools. But there's always the risk that someone could use this technology for malicious purposes.
So it's a balancing act, trying to maximize the benefits for public health while minimizing the potential for harm. What do the researchers ultimately recommend?
Well, in this case, they believe that the potential benefits of open sourcing outweigh the risks. They argue that Metagene 1's current capabilities aren't sophisticated enough to be used for creating harmful genetic sequences. But they also stress the need for ongoing vigilance and responsible development as these models become more advanced.
This seems like a reasonable approach. Be open and collaborative, but also be aware of the potential downsides and proceed with caution. Now, the paper also mentions some limitations of Metagene 1 itself. What are some areas where there's room for improvement?
Well, one limitation is that the model is primarily trained on short genetic sequences. It's really good at analyzing those snippets of DNA and RNA we get from wastewater, but it might not be as effective for tasks that require analyzing longer sequences, like whole genomes.
So it's a bit like having a specialized tool. That's great for a particular job, but might not be as versatile as a more general purpose tool.
That's a good analogy. Another limitation is that the training data is mostly from wastewater samples collected in the United States. To make these models even more powerful and reliable, we need more data from different parts in the world, different environments, and different species.
Makes sense. The more diverse the data, the better these models can learn, and the more accurately they'll be able to identify threats, no matter where they emerge. It's like training a detective. The more cases they've seen, the more effectively they can solve new crimes. So are the researchers working on addressing these limitations?
Absolutely. They're already looking at ways to train Metagene 1 on longer genetic sequences, and they're actively seeking out collaborations with researchers around the world to gather more diverse data sets.
That's exciting. And they mentioned some other interesting directions for future research too, right?
Yes. One area they're really interested in is developing a deeper understanding of how these genomic foundation models actually work. Right now, we know that they can make accurate predictions, but we don't fully understand the why behind those predictions. It's a bit like having a black box that spits out answers without explaining its reasoning.
So we need to lift the hood and figure out what's going on inside these AI brains.
Exactly. There are a few approaches they're exploring. One is to develop new tools for visualizing and analyzing the internal representations learned by these models. Another is to design experiments that probe how these models respond to different types of input. The goal is to move beyond simply knowing that these models work to understanding why they work.
That's fascinating. It's like we've created these powerful AI detectives, and now we're trying to understand their thought processes so we can learn from them and potentially make them even better.
That's a great way to put it. And another important area for future research is developing a standardized evaluation suite for these models. Right now, it's difficult to compare different models directly because they're often evaluated on different data sets and with different metrics. We need a common yardstick to measure their performance and make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
So we need to establish some ground rules for how we test and evaluate these AI models to make sure we're developing the most effective tools for pandemic monitoring.
Exactly. And a standardized evaluation suite would also encourage more collaboration and innovation in the field. It would create a level playing field for researchers to test their models and share their findings.
That's a great point. Now, before we move on to the bigger picture, I just have to say that the sheer scale of the data we're talking about here is still blowing my mind. 1.5 trillion base pairs. It's almost impossible to grasp the magnitude of that.
It is mind-boggling, isn't it? It's really a testament to the incredible advances in sequencing technology that we've seen in recent years. We can now generate massive amounts of genomic data at an unprecedented pace. And with the help of AI models like Metagene 1, we can finally start to make sense of all this data.
It's like we've been handed this incredibly complex map of the microbial world, and for the first time we have the tools to decipher it and unlock its secrets.
And those secrets hold the key to understanding the spread of diseases, identifying emerging threats, and potentially preventing future pandemics. It's an incredibly exciting time to be working in this field.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground so far. We've explored the world of metagenomics, met the impressive Metagene 1, and considered the challenges and opportunities that come with this technology.
Yeah.
But I think the most important question is, what does all of this mean for us? How could this technology actually change our lives?
That's a great question, and one that the researchers themselves are grappling with. Imagine a future where every city has its own microbial observatory, constantly monitoring wastewater for signs of disease. What impact could that have on our lives and on the way we approach healthcare?
Yeah, it is pretty mind-blowing to think about, like having this real-time view into the health of a city. It's almost like a citywide health checkup.
It's like having a finger on the pulse of the community's health, constantly monitoring for any signs of trouble. And the potential benefits are huge.
Okay, paint me a picture. What would this future look like?
Well, imagine you get a notification on your phone, kind of like a weather alert, but for disease outbreaks. And it says, flu cases detected in your neighborhood, take precautions. And then you could take steps to protect yourself and your family, maybe stay home for a few days, avoid crowded places.
That would be incredible. No more wondering if that cough is just a cold or something more serious. You'd have real-time data right at your fingertips.
Exactly. And this data wouldn't just help individuals. It could revolutionize how public health officials respond to outbreaks.
So instead of waiting for people to get sick and go to the doctor, we could see the warning signs in the wastewater and take action before an outbreak really takes hold.
That's right. Public health officials could focus resources on specific areas, where outbreaks are detected, maybe set up mobile testing sites. Or vaccination clinics. We could be much more proactive and targeted in our response.
It would be a game changer. Moving from a reactive approach to a preventative one, we could potentially stop outbreaks in their tracks.
And it goes beyond just reacting to immediate threats. This kind of continuous monitoring could also help us track long-term trends in disease prevalence. We could see how effective vaccination programs are, identify environmental factors that might contribute to disease spread, and even anticipate future outbreaks based on historical patterns.
It's like having a crystal ball for public health. We could make smarter decisions, allocate resources more effectively, and ultimately be better prepared for whatever comes our way.
It's all about using data to empower ourselves and make better decisions for our health. And this data could also be incredibly valuable for researchers developing new treatments and vaccines.
How so?
Well, by understanding how pathogens are evolving in real time,
Hmm.
researchers could design more effective interventions that target specific strains or anticipate future mutations. It would accelerate the development of new therapies and help us stay one step ahead of these constantly evolving microbes.
So it's this amazing feedback loop. Data from wastewater informs research. Research leads to better treatments and prevention strategies, and ultimately, we're all healthier and safer.
Precisely. And remember, this technology has applications beyond infectious diseases, too. Researchers are exploring ways to use wastewater analysis to track antibiotic resistance, monitor the prevalence of certain cancers, even measure levels of stress hormones in a population.
Wow, it really does paint a picture of a future where we have this incredible insight into the health and well-being of entire communities. It's almost hard to wrap my head around the possibilities.
It's definitely exciting, and it's important to remember that this research is still in its early stages. There's so much more to learn and discover, but the potential is clearly there. And I think we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of what this technology can do.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah.
From the nitty-gritty of metagenomics to the mind-blowing possibilities of AI-powered disease surveillance. It really makes you think about the future of public health.
Yeah.
And how we can use technology to create a healthier world.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation and a reminder that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places, like our wastewater.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those thought-provoking questions. Until next time, stay curious.